Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
and I'm Stephen Park. And today we bring you our third read of Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jesse Q. Sutanto. And one of the things we see in this read is this relationship bloom between Vera and Emma, and it's very sweet. It's a lot of this wholesome need of what Emma is requiring from someone to guide her through life, and what Vera is requiring from someone that actually shows her affection back, which it seems like she really hasn't been getting a lot of within her last 10 years or something since her husband's passed away, since Tilly's been gone. And it's very, very sweet. One of the lines that highlights how cute this is this line that says, "Is there anything sweeter than having your hand held firmly by tiny fingers?" Did you find this to be a sweet moment?
It was definitely a sweet moment. It made my heart so warm and made me audibly want to say, "Aw."
Right. And I think that's the normal reaction. I think that's the reaction that most people will have when they see a grandparent with a child of some sort.
Exactly, it's the context.
The issue is, I don't think that was my first reaction.
Hmm.
I think my first reaction was how her hands must have been either sticky or wet. Or anytime I think of a child's hand, anyone beneath the age of maybe 10 or 11, I guess outside of middle school, I always think that they're going to be sticky or wet hands, and it always makes me feel very gross to touch them.
That's fair. I definitely think about that when I think about holding children's hands, how many germs are living and breeding in their little fingers.
Yeah, and so when this scene happened, all I could think of was this sticky, nasty hand reaching up for Vera. I was like, no. And this happens with my friends' kids too, and
Mm.
I don't mind it. I'll still hold their hand. I'm not just gonna leave them hanging. But it's a moment in my brain where I think, oh, I have to do this so that this person doesn't feel denied or doesn't feel rejected. And so I hold their hand, and I want to say I appreciate it, but there's a lot of thought in my head where I think it's sticky and gross and nasty.
So I think it's different for me. For some reason, when I'm holding the hand of my friend's child, I don't think of the grossness. I think, oh, that's sweet for some reason.
That's fair. I would much rather pick up my friends' kids than I would hold their hands. I'd rather
Mm.
pick them up in any other way rather than by hand, but I'll still do it. I'm not traumatizing these children by thinking about their nasty, sticky hands.
For sure. Let's not traumatize them with rejection.
Right. And in the tone of being a support system, let's go into our recommendation for the week.
Our recommendation for the week is Asian American Arts Alliance, also known as A4. According to their website, they are a nonprofit organization dedicated to greater representation, equity, and opportunities for Asian American artists and cultural organizations across all disciplines. A4 hosts events, they post grants and other opportunities for artists and cultural representatives, and they publish an online magazine called The AMP to uplift AAPI art and culture in NYC and beyond. You can learn more about their work on their website at aaartsalliance.org and on Instagram at AAArtsAlliance. That's AAARTSALLIANCE.
Yep. And that's going to be our recommendation for the week. Okay, so we're here with our third read of Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, and we have just finished reading pages 170 through 252 on the physical copy, or for everyone, that was chapters 21 through 29. What have we learned up till this point?
So, up till this point, Vera has gathered her suspects under one roof to first have a feast, then to talk business. She talks to Julia, Ricky, Sana, and Oliver, trying to get down to who did it. However, it turns out that Marshall's cause of death was bird dander, stalling Vera's search for the murderer.
Right. And so that leads us to the last thing that happened before we finished our read, and that was that Vera's store was broken in for a second time, first time being Marshall's death and finding him on the floor of her tea shop.
Mm-hmm.
This time, she finds that everything's broken up, tea jars are smashed. Nothing looks like it's stolen, though.
No, they haven't gotten to her safe.
Right, her safe, which is in her apartment upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
But even anything on the bottom floor, you would think that if someone broke in, there might be an attempt to steal something, or there should have been a reason, but
Right.
it doesn't seem like there was a reason.
Right. It seemed like the only reason that they went into the shop was to break everything and to cause mayhem.
Unless they're looking for something.
That's true.
Did you have any theories of why someone would have broken into Vera's tea shop?
I think that they're looking for the flash drive.
So you think it's the murderer?
Yes, I think so.
So I think the same thing, maybe. I don't know. I'm still on this kick of thinking that Marshall has accidentally died, but it's seeming less and less likely with the more evidence that we're getting.
Hmm.
But there is so much suspicion around all this stuff. We just don't quite know yet.
Fair. Something that's come to mind because you brought that up is, do you think that the accidental death was because of Winifred? Just a thought. I know that's a very, very big jump.
Remind me who Winifred is.
Winifred is the patisserie owner next door.
I did think there was something suspicious because as we got to the end of the read, there was a point where Sana, Ricky, and Oliver were cleaning up the shop, and Sana had mentioned that the windows were so gross and grimy that you couldn't see through them from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a mention of how Winifred had come towards the shop or had known about the shop being broken into.
Yes.
And Sana kind of mentions that the only way that Winifred could have possibly known was by peering into the shop and having to really look.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some sketchy behavior by Winifred for sure.
Totally.
I did start putting suspicions on Winifred, but I don't know what that connection would have been.
Right. I don't know how Winifred could have accidentally given Marshall bird dander and how that connection could have happened unless there's bird dander in her shop.
Right. Well, let's talk about a little bit how we get here. So,
Mm-hmm.
with this tea shop thing happens, everything's smashed, and at this point, everyone's formed a relationship with Vera.
Yes.
We're talking about Sana, Ricky, Julia, Emma, and Oliver.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to figure out how they can be a support system for her, and Oliver, Ricky, and Sana all kind of agree that they want to help rebuild the shop.
Mm-hmm.
Julia is stuck in this situation where she seems to be the only person that might have residency to house Vera for a while,
Yes.
especially knowing that Vera lives right above her tea shop and the fear that something might have happened or wants to happen in the future with Vera's safety.
Mm-hmm.
So Julia kind of begrudgingly allows for Vera to come over and live with her and Emma.
She was kind of voluntold because Vera kind of started her sob story of, what am I gonna do? Where am I gonna go? And Julia feels the need to offer her space.
Right. And that's when we really get to see this relationship form between Vera, Julia, and Emma.
Mm-hmm.
And we begin to see how everyone kind of needs each other.
Yeah, how Vera is kind of the glue that makes things work.
Right. Not only is Vera such a good influence on Emma and helping Emma kind of come out of her shell, Vera also, and maybe even more importantly so, is a much better influence on Julia and
Mm.
how she is able to release Julia from the mental and maybe the emotional bondage that was left there by Marshall.
Yes, and so she does that not only in the metaphorical sense in releasing Julia from that bondage, but also in the physical sense, in that Julia no longer has to worry about taking care of Emma on her own. She has Vera to lean onto. And even though she is worried at first, following Vera and Emma to the park and trying to make sure that her child is safe, she does realize that to her surprise, Emma just trusts Vera as a safe person.
Right. And for me, that trust starts to get portrayed onto Emma from how Julia starts to trust Vera.
Mm.
It's not until we see Julia finally start to open up, be a little bit more freed, less protective of Emma, that we see Emma start to free up. A couple of cases of this is when Emma was in the kitchen with Vera, and Julia catches Emma with all this flour and everything in her. And Julia's normal response would have been to kind of freak out about it, take her away and bathe her. But what Julia does in that instance is to kind of laugh. We
Mm.
also see a moment where Julia is extremely stressed about this job that she's going to take. It's her first job in a very long time. And as Julia starts to portray this nervousness, this anxiety, that's when we also see Emma kind of go back into her own habits. And so
Mm.
I think Emma is a representation of Julia's emotions. And I think Vera is healing both of them by what we see is Vera helping Emma, But what we get a bigger sense of is Vera is helping Julia.
Definitely. And she does that also with Julia in her photography work. When Julia is trying to minimize what she's doing, Vera says, no, a man wouldn't do that. He would be proud of whatever he's doing. So you need to be proud too. So she kind of brings this confidence into Julia that she lost when she left school.
Right. And on multiple levels, we're seeing Julia start to formulate who she was and now is almost regaining as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, in a lot of ways, Vera is kind of invading her life. Like, Vera's
Yes.
doing all this cooking, Vera's putting her into different habits like eating breakfast. Vera is also telling Julia to clean the house at different times. She creates a chore wheel, which Julia almost appreciates in terms of helping out with her own anxieties. We also see that Vera takes over the master bedroom.
Yes. She kind of finagles her way into getting the master bedroom by saying that the elders are usually the ones who get the best room in the house.
Right. So this is a beautiful part of a relationship that we see from Vera. We see this lady who, even as a stranger, can change lives,
Mhm.
and definitely for the better.
Yes, absolutely.
As we see this stuff happen, we see the darker side of Vera. And I don't want to say dark, it's more the Snoopy, the lady that gossips at church side of Vera.
Mm,
And this is the lady that we see eventually find the laptop that's attached to Marshall and finds this boatload of evidence that starts to unlock this trail of where we're going to be going into next.
hmm When she finds this laptop, which was hidden, she realizes that the key to this laptop was the flash drive that she had. And like you said, when she plugs in the flash drive, that's when all this information starts to unfold. And one of the things that unfolds is she notices is that there are folders for both Sana and Riki.
Right, so let's go over Sana first because that's what
Mhm.
the book does.
Yeah.
So Sana's folder is containing her artwork, which also has NFTs. And this leads to Sana explaining her story of how she met Marshall and the situation that she eventually got herself into.
Right. She meets him at a student showcase, and eventually Marshall gets Sana to sign over her artwork in order for him to use them as NFTs.
Right, and this is what we find in the folders. And Sana has to come out to Vera and Julia and eventually Ricky as well. But in a sense, this frees her from the bondage of the lies and the mystery that she's kind of upheld, not only to the people that she met, but to herself and also a little bit to her own mother.
Mhm. And something that puts together why she was so afraid of the police finding her is because the night of Marshall's death, Sana was following him, and when he was spotted, she scratched him
Right. Right in the face. Gave
right
him
in
a
the
nice
face.
old slap.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, she has DNA under her fingernails, which can always look sketchy. Which,
Mhm.
not can, but always does look sketchy to a murder victim or
Mhm.
possible murder victim. But she admits to all this stuff, and she also continues to go along with the fact that she did not murder Marshall that night.
Right. So she knows that she didn't do anything. She was just worried that she was going to be pinned for doing the deed.
Right. So at this point, do you think anything of Sana in terms of her being guilty or complicit with the murder or
No.
possible murder?
No, I don't think she's complicit at all. I think her worry about having DNA under her fingernails was valid, but she has nothing to do with the murder at all.
Right. So let's go into Ricky then. So Ricky's files were also found, and for Ricky, it was scalping bots, which was a form of Marshall trying to boost his own NFTs. Honestly, I don't know NFT stuff that well, but it's a way for Marshall to cheat the system,
Yeah.
and Ricky was the one that built this out for him, but he did it for a very good cause.
He was trying to fund his brother's education, but unfortunately, Marshall cheated him on the end of his deal.
Right. Ricky was promised $25,000 to make this bot. What Ricky was experiencing was his brother, who he loved so much, was getting bullied and beaten up. He saw his brother start to fall into a depression.
Mhm.
And so Ricky just wanted to make everything right. I mean, He was eating cup of ramen every night. He was doing everything in his given power to try to support his brother, and this was the act that he was hoping would help him.
Yeah.
What Marshall did was utilize Ricky and then not pay him much. I mean, Marshall gave him $1,000, but it wasn't enough to fund anything.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, Marshall threatens Ricky to call his job and tell him that he did this thing, which could get Ricky fired.
Right, which would cause him to lose even more money.
Right. And Ricky's fear and his whole reason for being here is because that night, Ricky was so furious that he did punch Marshall in the face.
Yes, in public. And so he thought the police would find him and that he would be put in jail. But what he finds out instead is that Marshall died. And he thinks in his mind that he was the cause of his death because he punched Marshall too hard.
Mm-hmm. And very quickly, Vera lets us know that Ricky's arms are too tiny by pinching his tiny biceps and saying, "You would have never caused this."
Vera says that his arms are too soft to cause that much damage.
Right. At this point, do you think Ricky is involved in the possible murder?
No. Like Sana, Ricky was rightfully worried to be pinned for the death of Marshall, but he is not in any way connected.
Right. This is kind of the bulk of what we know. There's also Oliver, who wasn't really mentioned in this read very much. The
Mm-hmm.
one thing we did see was he went to his father's house with Julia and Emma,
Mm-hmm.
and as they were trying to bring food up to his father, they were rejected at the door.
Yes, Baba refuses to see them, and all he says in the end is, "Don't come here again,"
Right.
which is so heartbreaking.
Yeah. It's something that Oliver has been carrying around with him this whole time since childhood, since his mother's passing.
Mm-hmm.
It fits with the character. It just is
Right.
a really crappy part about it.
Right, which is unfortunate on two levels in my mind. First, there's no way for them to heal from losing Marshall, but there's also no way for them to rekindle that bond.
Right. Which doesn't seem to be the father's MO anyway.
Hmm.
That is kind of the story that we're given so far. What I did want to talk about, though, is this Vera character.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, she is the spotlight of all of this. She is kind of the center and the gravitational point to where all these characters come from.
Mm-hmm.
In the very beginning, we even discussed, is Vera a good character? Is she an annoying character? Like, who is she?
Right.
And she's still all of the above. I mean, that point hasn't changed. But what I saw in this read was how much everyone needed Vera.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do they need her from the standpoint of what she can provide physically, because it's really not much besides food. What she provides is this mother figure, and overall, this mother figure saying that it's okay. So
Yes.
with Sana, it's her battle with her artwork, but also with her identity and her mother constantly trying to say that she needs to go to this route or this route. And so it's this built up stress and tension. And all Vera says is, it's okay, your artwork's great, like you're fine. And it releases so much out of Sana that she just kind of sobs for like hours in public.
Mm-hmm. Yes, with Sana, it's more that she needed to change the way that she was thinking about her own artwork and realizing that she could just have fun with it.
Right. For Ricky, we see Vera act as this person saying, "You didn't kill Marshall. You're fine. You're a good person. You're still trying to help your brother." Like she's reminding him of how good of a person he is. And that's what a mother does. We don't know Ricky's mother at all throughout this whole story,
Mm-hmm.
but we know that she's not there with him.
Mm-hmm.
So what Vera does is act as this substitute of a mother who can then provide that reassurance. And once again, it, in a sense, heals Ricky.
Right. She shows him that what he did with the scalping bot was a mistake, yes, but he was doing it for a good reason.
Right. And then we also saw it with Julia. We see her acting much more like a grandmother to Emma,
Mm-hmm.
but also this motherly figure to Julia to help her kind of get back on track with not only her career, but what her dreams and her goals have been.
Right. She has this conversation with Julia where Julia talks about how she felt most alive when she was taking photography classes. And at that moment, Julia was saying, "Isn't that a terrible thing to say as a mother?" But Vera then tells her, "No, it's totally okay. You have your own identity, and it's okay to feel alive in other ways than being a mother.
Yep. And so, as pushy as Vera is, we see the role that she uptakes and how beneficial it is to so many people. So, it's hard to really dislike her.
It's even harder to dislike her now because, like you said, we saw her annoying features in the first and second read, but in this third read, we see the softer and kinder and more grandmother like features that make her a rounded person.
Right. She still doesn't eliminate the annoying features.
No.
It's just we see more of this side.
Yes.
There is a funny part of this where her son Tilly, who originally has been dodging his mom throughout this whole book and just kind of in his adult life, it seems like,
Right.
finally gets this turnaround point where he's worried about Vera and Vera's kind of not ignoring him, but in a sense shooing him off,
Yes.
which is this reversal of roles of caretaking that is happening between Tilly and his mother.
Hmm.
So we'll probably see a change in that relationship too. But before we close out this read, what are your thoughts on this book so far? Like, I guess less so on if you enjoy it or not, but where do you see this going next? Because we have one more read and things are going to have to settle.
Hmm. What I see happening next in the book is we're going to get down to how exactly Marshall was killed. And I'm thinking that either Winifred or Oliver has something to do with it.
Hmm.
Winifred because she's very sketchy. Oliver because I think he did something accidentally. But who knows?
Do you think there's a possible appearance of Alex being the murderer, who was Vera's favorite tea shop customer?
I don't think so, but that would be such a big plot twist. Like
Right.
accidentally bringing in Bird Dander.
Right. I think Winifred just constantly being in the background of this book makes that character seem suspicious.
Mm,
I don't know. It still is so unsolved. The police are doing exactly what I expect them to do, which is not very much and
yes.
things incorrectly. So we'll figure out what happens as we enter our fourth read. And what is that fourth read?
We're reading pages 253 to 333 in the physical copy, and for everyone, chapters 30 through 40, including the epilogue.
Yep. And so, if you're also enjoying this book, if you have any thoughts on Vera or who the murderer or possible murderer is, how can people reach out to us?
Y'all can email us at asianbookclubpod@gmail.com or join the conversation on Instagram at asianbookclubpod.
Yep. And we also have our website, which is asianbookclubpod.com, which has our bookstore for books that we've read in the past, books that we recommend, and books that we plan to read in the future.
And a great way to support us is to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast.
Otherwise, make sure to be happy, be healthy, and read a book.
Ingat!
Bye.
Bye!